Hello and welcome to the meeting of York SACRE. I'm Councillor Njawala, Chair, and so we'll just kick off the agenda. So firstly, let's deal with apologies for absence. So I have received apologies from Ian Hodgson, Teko Michaels, Andy Todd. Hello. All right, there's feedback. Right. Okay, so I can hear myself, yes. Okay. Just in relation to the apologies for absence, that does mean that Group C is not represented, and therefore we are not quorate. Which is an issue with signing off the minutes and is an issue with signing off the annual report. Unfortunately, the meeting, which was due to take place on the 1st of February, had to be moved due to the teacher strikes. So, is there a way forward from tonight, or do we need to convene a stripped down meeting for signing off?
Yeah, I'll need to get in touch with you all soon. To find a date and I can get an amendment from each group. So yeah,
And is it not possible to circulate the report and ask for sign off?
Okay, so we need a quorate meeting to do that. The minimum would be, I understand, one person from each group. So providing that all that meeting is doing is ratifying what we agree tonight, there shouldn't be requirement for everyone to turn up, but there would be a requirement for one person from each group A, B, C, and D to attend, and it would need to be a formal meeting, even if it only lasts 5 minutes. Okay, so
Chair, I know we spoke as well about looking at permission to do hybrid meetings to address that. Would that meeting also vote on that to enable then?
what we would do is to include item 7 from tonight's meeting at that meeting, which would amend things so that going forward there could be virtual meetings which would assist maintaining quoracy, as that appears to be quite elusive at the moment. Okay, so thank you for that. Are there any declarations of interest? No, I'm not seeing any of those. Item 3, just for clarification, we can't approve them, but if there are omissions from the minutes, please do speak up, and then when we are in a position to formally sign them off, then we can do that. Okay, I'm not seeing any indications that the draft minutes need to be updated. No. Right, that brings us on to agenda item 4. So welcoming new members, Sue Bland, as you're in Group B. And Karen Vincent. So you're in Group A. Right. Okay, so that brings us on to item 5, which is the annual report 21, 22.
Sorry, Chair, can I just see which faith are you representing?
I was just asking Olivia the same question. What does each group represent?
So if I explain what each group represents, and then I think
Yeah,
Ben's got a
sorry.
separate question. So Group A is members of faiths other than the Church of England. So it's faiths representing the local community. And so in our constitution, we have identified those other Christian denominations, different faiths that represent the local community, and humanism. And Group B is the Church of England. Group C is teacher representatives, and then Group D is the local authority. So particularly if members want to know what the, I suppose, roles and responsibilities of those different groups are, then the SACRE handbook outlines that for you.
Right.
I was just interested to know which group you're currently.
So I work at the secondary school just at the road. So yeah, Roman Catholic.
Which one?
Right. Lovely. Thank you.
You can't be a teacher. Can't make you group B, group C for tonight.
I wasn't sure how much those teachers.
Sorry, just for clarification, because I was in the same boat as my colleagues here. I knew what Group C was, and I clearly knew what Group D was, but I didn't know the distinction between the other two. And we go through it virtually every other meeting. It just would be, you write the word group there anyway. It would just be helpful to see what they were on every document that you get. It just is, it's that's possible.
They are in the annual report. So the description of the future is in the annual report.
I think it might be helpful to put in brackets.
Yeah, I just think so, but whenever we've got.
The limited amount of additional ink that would be
Thank you, Chair.
required.
Some agendas for SACREs do is that they do put the membership on the back of the agenda so that you also know which, for example, for in Group A, which group that person is representing, which can be helpful as well for new members.
It is on the front page, and it just needs to say the word.
Yeah.
Okay. So the annual report. Maxine, are you needing?
Yes, Chair, the annual report is now complete in terms of all the sections that needed to be represented. We needed to add in the key stage 4 results, which have now been published. So you've got there the outcomes from the GCSE full course and also the short course. Key stage 5 results are still pending and have been very, very slow to be published this year. But as you'll see, against national results, York's outcomes remain very, very strong across the different grade boundaries at GCSE. We still also got quite a healthy entry rate in the city as well for GCSE. The annual report has to be formally signed off by the SACRE, which is why it's important that we do have a quorum meeting. It is then submitted to the DfE and SACRE. It's now late because obviously it's usually submitted by the 31st of December. My understanding is from Olivia that many SACREs are in the position this year where they haven't been able to get their annual reports in on time. So far, the DfE haven't chased it. Neither have SACRE, so they're showing some understanding, I think, in terms of getting it in. But obviously, I'm very conscious that the time's ticking away and we'll actually have to start this current academic year's annual reports fairly soon. So it's important that we do have a quorum meeting, that this can just be signed off and submitted.
I do know other SACRE, because of the delay in key stage 4 and 5 data, that's been part of the reason why some SACREs have obviously delayed, but we've now got our key stage 4 data to go in. So I guess it's about as soon as is possible having a quorum meeting so that we can send it in.
When will we receive that data?
The key stage 4 data is in here as
It's
an
already in.
annex. Yeah. Obviously, if before we organise that quorum meeting, I've got something on key stage 5, I'll bring that to, I'll also circulate that.
Okay, do we need to wait for that key stage?
No, it's not necessary to do that. It's I think the key stage 4 is the important bit.
So subject to the advertising of a public meeting and the time involved with that, we're looking at fortnight being as early as possible. And I'll be with you to circulate so that people can indicate that they are happy to be that one representative. Others are happy to, you can come, but it will be really
Chair, I've got
formal.
a sort of off the wall suggestion, which is if we had representatives of Group A, B, C and D at the Ralph Butterfield visit, we could actually hold an extraordinary meeting at that point and sign it off. Because we would have, well, we've got 2 from Group D, we've got 1 from Group A, we would have Group C because Andy would be there. So we would just need somebody from Group B. And I know it's hard for you because, yeah, because you're in school, yeah. And I'm assuming the same with Kirsty. She's not, yeah. It was just a thought whether we could actually achieve that, but.
I am seeking a
second Church of England
For,
representative, yeah,
that, but Kirsty's keen to stay involved in SACRE longer term.
right.
But I haven't had the conversation, but it is another teacher because I think teacher voice is helpful.
Yeah.
But obviously they wouldn't be available during the school day.
Okay, thank you. It almost works, but not quite.
Yeah. If it's for the 5-minute bit, I could come to that.
Yeah, I think all we'll be doing, Sue, is at the end of that visit, just have a quick 5-minute. Is everybody happy with the annual report?
Could I do it at the start of that?
Yeah, that we could do it even then. Yeah, you know, to work around you, Sue, so that we've actually got a representative from each committee.
I could do that.
Yeah.
Right, would it need to be webcast?
Needs to be recorded.
It would need to be.
But I can liaise with Richard and Ollie about that. Okay,
So
because I could
we
take an
moving
iPad
parts.
in and record it that way, I suppose. And
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
speak with Richard
yeah.
tomorrow.
Okay. So if we work on a technological solution to that requirement, as well as ensuring that one person from each group is in attendance. Right, and that would cover the minutes, the annual report, and whatever we decide in virtual meetings. But I think, given the difficulty we've had in achieving quoracy, there may be some support for that. Right, so back to the annual report.
Yes, so in terms of the annual report, as we discussed last time, the annual report summarises the previous academic year's activity. It's 21-22. What you've got there in terms of structure is the introduction from the previous chair, which just summarises some of the highlights of that academic year. The details of the meetings that were held during that academic year. There was only one that was not quorate, which was the 13th of March. The others were all quorate. The information around monitoring that was done during that year, obviously we were still recovering from COVID partly during that year, but we have got the evidence now from the Key Stage 4 results. And should the Key Stage 5 become more available, then as I say, I'll circulate those as well, but I'll circulate them by exception anyway at our next meeting. There's also the different links to other bodies, and obviously one of the highlights that we will be able to report in 22-23 report is the Interfaith competition, the logo competition, which we can put into there. And then it's just the things that need to go in statutorily around the structure of SACRE, who's in particular, different committees, and also the statements around the annual budget. So as you can see, total spend is outlined there. So in 21-22, of the £3,000 annual budget, just over 1,500 was actually spent. The majority of the spend was in the previous year when we were launching the Agreed Syllabus. That budget follows the financial year, so and it hasn't been removed or taken in savings, so that the annual budget remains 3K for SACRE. And obviously one of the things that you can consider is how you might want to use that in the future to support things like the development plan. Particularly where you may want to commission any training for schools, for example. I think that's where the visits and the work we do around teacher voice this year, and also the people's voice, will actually help to decide how we want to use future funding to support the development plan. I know the maintained schools are quite keen to have a joint training day, aren't they? To support curriculum developments in the city. So again, that may be an appropriate use of that funding. I think that's next January. Everybody's schooling January 24. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions to Maxine on the annual report? Councillor Cuthbertson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Maxine, thanks for the remarks there. We mentioned the limited budget that that SACRE has. I think it's quite important that we should give, alongside our outreach to schools in terms of monitoring visit, we should give those schools some way of actually participating in the RE process, possibly by a kind of wire award arrangement, which could probably be done on a bit of a cut down budget, and may be possible to do within the headroom that we might have over a four-year or 5-year period. I'd like to make that suggestion and just ask that we consider it more carefully, please.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Yes, I just wanted to second that. I know it's something we've considered before, haven't we? Councillor Cuthbertson and I were both keen on that previously.
I think it would be useful, obviously, to get some information together about the wire award and actually then take that to the Maintained Schools group, so that they've got a bit more of an understanding of it, that we get some feedback on it, because it will also be important, I think, for RE teachers in the city to develop and own that type of things themselves.
All right, any other questions on the annual report? Okay, so that will go forward to the quorum meeting we had. Right. Item 6, monitoring of standards.
I think that links to obviously the training that we've done this evening, and also the starting of the pilot visits, which is one of the ways that we're going to develop the monitoring role in a more active way in 22-23 and onwards as part of the development plan. I think as well that the rich information that comes back from those opportunities to actually see the agreed syllabus in live time will also help in terms of the review of the development plan, and also the development of what RE teachers in the city would want to see more of in order to help develop the quality of RE. Because as Olivia said, the agreed syllabus is very much a framework in which RE can be developed. And it's down to schools to develop their own individual RE curriculums. But what we may well find from just having that dialogue is that there will be areas that they would want more support with. And that's something that can be fed back from these monitoring opportunities.
I know we've also feedback from the last SACRE meeting was about subject knowledge on humanism. So that will obviously be the first thing that I've been tasked with exploring, setting that up. So that's one example of feedback then leading to just also probably helpful for members to know that the report on religious education from Ofsted is due by the end of this year. Likely calendar year rather than academic year, but that report as well might then give us a steer on some of the things that might be helpful to in terms of CPD for schools to provide as well.
I think from the discussion at the last meeting about the ONS data, it is valuable to start to look at SACRE's role in helping schools to develop engagement with RE for those of no faith, because obviously we know that's a significant community in the city.
Right.
Can I just ask a question really? I know the scope is worldviews, and so it's supposed to be expanded and more inclusive, isn't it? I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure Dariush finds it as well. But as a sort of smaller, perhaps, community of faith, we don't have any inclusion specifically. You know, we come under the Christian kind of heading, but we have no. Olivia.
Yes, and I think that's where, in terms of the revision of the agreed syllabus, having the information about local communities was really important, so that schools had information about local Latter-day Saints and Baha'i community. But I think, again, that's another thing for SACRE to consider, because that was at that point. But what ongoing resource, thinking about the budget and also thinking about documentation we provide for schools, what is going to be helpful documentation for schools to understand the context of religion and worldviews in the city of York, and particularly in terms of looking at context and local studies. So a good example also was the fantastic exhibition in the museum that we came to in terms of the York Jewish community. And again, how can we help schools by providing resources so that if they're looking at Judaism, for example, they're not just looking at textbook RE, but actually exploring local communities. So I think that's something that would be helpful for SACRE to consider, what they would want and then how that's resourced, so that rather than it just happening when a syllabus is launched, actually what ongoing resources are provided for schools.
I think the other thing that we've not established a strong link to as York SACRE is obviously the work that's taking place through the City of Sanctuary, and also the Schools of Sanctuary, part of that. And it's whether we actually invited representatives who were leading on that to come to a future SACRE.
Okay, that's a good suggestion for a future work plan. I'm conscious that agenda item 10 really brought that in. So rather than go over the same ground, is there anything that people would have raised in agenda item 10, commitment for the agreed syllabus to reflect non-religious worldviews?
Chair, I would recommend if we're going to be voting, I mean, obviously we can't this evening because we're not quorate, but if we're going to vote on a commitment for that, I think it would it would be helpful for a paper to be prepared or something a little bit more concrete that I'm conscious of the member who raised that's not here this evening, so I can't speak, we can't speak for them, but I think something so that we know what it is that we're committing to and agreeing on, I think would be helpful. And from a syllabus perspective, I'm happy to put together what we currently have, and if the member was willing to put together what they would want in a future syllabus, and that would at least be something concrete that when it comes to the review of the syllabus, we know what we've agreed and committed to.
Okay.
I was just going to say, it's not as if they're not there, is it?
No.
Humanists are there in our syllabus. They're not missed out.
No. Yes. Sorry, so in the review of the syllabus, the language was updated to make it clear that in all of the study it was religion and worldviews, and there were specific non-religious worldviews, but obviously the member wants a commitment to us going further. So I think it's helpful if we're clear about what it is we're agreeing to, so that because it'll be 4 years' time when we're reviewing, and that's quite a long way away, and we don't know which members will be here at that time, that I think if we have at least something a bit more concrete about what we're saying we're committed to in a review of the syllabus, then it means that can be dutifully done rather than it relying on memory.
Okay. Ben.
And I'm sure it's right that that's done with the member who raised it. That said, could we also recognise that humanism in itself is not the only non-religious worldview, and therefore that's not the only person who is, they don't get to own this exclusively?
I think, Chair, it would be helpful in terms of the context of religion and worldviews. There's probably a bit of context setting as well for us, SACRE, in terms of the National Religion and Worldviews Project and the direction of travel in terms of RE curriculum development nationally, so that we understand any curriculum development in that light. So I'm able, as professional RE advisor, if instructed to do so, to set that bit of scene setting, and then members setting the scene setting in terms of particularly committee A and B, I think is helpful, so that then we know what we are discussing and agreeing to.
Sorry, Chair. Again, we kind of strayed into doing 10, going on correlate. Again, there are. We're not representative of all faith groups, even in our group A. There's a huge section of the Christian faith that aren't covered even in group A. So I think a root and branch look at how it's kind of formatted and represented is good, and I think it in that piece that we're going to get that Livy's going to do for us, I think it would be good to look at wider than just because SACRE 4 years ago, we didn't have a humanist representative. The human, forgive my wording, but the humanist guy pops up. We all think it's brilliant. Let's have him on that, and so we bring him on. We were reactive, and I think let's take guidelines from national SACRE, see what they say, see what they advise. Olivia, you'll put a piece together for us to have a look at. But I think we need to. We're going to be representative, both here in the city as well. We just need to look at the whole thing, really, root and branch.
Bring in Olivia, then Ben.
I think we're almost talking about two things here, and I think we need to be mindful of that. The member has brought a request for a commitment in terms of the syllabus, and the syllabus is bound by those national legal frameworks for syllabuses, and the Religion and Worldviews Project, particularly, I think is a different journey that religious education nationally is going on. And I think what you can't do, and what Ofsted remind us not to do in any syllabus, is you can only do collectively enough. You can't cover everything, and actually there is autonomy from a school setting to make decisions about religion and worldviews. In terms of membership, actually the membership of Committee A, it's the local authority SACRE. And so a separate activity might be to look at the census figures and ask the question, is our constitution still appropriate in terms of representation? Because I don't think there's any SACRE that has every member it could ever have, and there may be those who just are not able to fill vacancies. So I think it's probably helpful to separate those two things so that we don't tie ourselves in knots about curriculum coverage as opposed to membership representation.
Indeed, had the previous census figures been included, and obviously the Jedi representative would not be included in this current consequence of the census.
That would be a local authority decision.
I'm sure you can do both. So I want to go back to a comment that Olivia made earlier.
Is your mic on?
I hope so.
Okay, right.
When you were talking about the needing to provide information to schools about not just faiths generally, but what happened locally. Much as I hate volunteering for work, I would be more than happy to produce a one-side fact sheet about Judaism in York, and it strikes me it would be really helpful for the SACRE to do one, to ask each member of Committee A to produce a one-side sheet, and then we could think about who else we wanted to ask to do a one-sider as well. But I'm
You've
happy
already
to
done
model.
that for SACRE, so
Have I?
yes, you have. So we do. You may have forgotten,
That's the
but
sort of work I really-
yes, excellent. So you've already done it. You've already marked your own homework. So when the syllabus was launched, all SACRE members were asked, particularly Committee A and Committee B, to provide something. So on the launch of the syllabus, there was information about the Baha'i community. Penny, you provided some information. You provided a two-side on the York Jewish community. And I think, again, one thing is reminding schools that they exist. We also provided some information about Interfaith York and visits and visitors. And I think over time, it's thinking about how do we build on that. So your wonderful exhibition, you know, is there a way of putting that into a PDF for schools in terms of providing examples of the local Jewish community? I think it's about ongoing, isn't it? Providing resource. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Right. So, anything else on agenda item 10? There's quite a lot of work there, but just so that Ange, in terms of the notes on the step forward, so we have asked Olivia to look at what would go into a report on that. And that we would invite members of group A and B to provide summaries, and therefore by inference, people who aren't represented in faith groups or non-faith groups not represented in group A would be able to submit a summary for consideration.
Yeah, I think the request has been a commitment to reflect non-religious worldviews. So I think the paper will be about that. But I think then there needs to be a discussion in the meeting based on that paper so that all members have an opportunity to comment on it, and then an agreement is made. So I think the report would be a bit of scene setting on what our syllabus currently includes, the request by the member and what they're asking SACRE to consider, and a bit of scene setting on the direction of travel of curriculum nationally that might address some of those things, the members, because what I don't know at the minute is specifically what the member is asking of us. So I think some liaising with the member first to clarify that. I'm presuming this will be for the our next meeting, which is May.
Yes.
So that gives time for us. I don't know whether it's the clerk that would contact the member or who would contact the member and ask if they could just perhaps be in touch with me and outline what they're wanting that commitment to be, and then I could work with them to shape a paper that comes to the meeting, but there would be space for members to consider it and to discuss it before any decision was made.
Okay.
That seems to
Right,
Fit
I
what-
think that's the detailed proposal. Does that fit with people's recollection of what we just debated? Right. Okay, so coming back to item 7, virtual meetings. Consider holding future SACRE meetings virtually.
Yes, this was obviously a suggestion at the last meeting around encouraging quoracy. We would have to formally amend the constitution, which does talk about in-person meetings. And the idea would be in that extraordinary meeting with all the groups represented to take a vote that we would allow virtual meetings, as I say, as a way of encouraging quoracy.
Councillor Rowley. And then Councillor Cuthbertson.
Thanks, Chair. So I have no issue with having virtual meetings, and I have no issue with face-to-face meetings as we're having this afternoon. From my experience, I think if we tried to do a hybrid of the two, that would be difficult. That one of the committees that I chair, we've tried it, and it's just because the technology, and always behind the technology isn't available for us to see on a screen absent members if we had some kind of hybrid meeting. And Chair, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that that's what we're proposing. So for me, it would either the whole meeting would either have to be virtual or it would all have to be physical, not a hybrid. So it's a plea, please don't go down that route.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cuthbertson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if we should allow our decision on this, or the eventual decision on this, to have a meeting that was either virtual or face-to-face, simply because I'm sure there must be opportunities, and probably just from the point of view of keeping this committee, this council together, it will be necessary to meet in person from time to time, so not to restrict ourselves to either of those two particular paths.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
I'm just asking the question, really. I don't know, and I'm thinking possibly in terms of corporate parenting as an example. Is there any kind of requirement that statutory meetings need to be in person or not, or is it?
Yeah, this is different. So whereas we can't have virtual council meetings, this falls outside of that legislation. It's from a different set of legislation. Arish?
Well, I would have thought one of the purposes of having virtual meetings is to increase the attendance, and therefore the problems such as not being quorate and so on to arise. But middle way for me would be that if it is possible, 4 or 5 days before the meeting to ascertain whether we are going to have a quorate or not. Then if it will not, and there are those who have sent their opportunity are able to use that facilities, then we allow that to happen.
Oh, right. And Ben, did you want to come in and then I'll make some suggestions?
Well, unless I'm really blind, I can find nothing in what's been circulated to us that says the meeting should happen in person.
I think it's in the constitution.
Right.
If it doesn't say it, it doesn't say it. If it's a rule that we're creating for ourselves, then we can create whatever rule we want.
Right. If I take the comments that have been made and some previous ones, that if we gave ourselves the capability to have virtual meetings for agendas where there is a critical decision which requires quoracy as a belt and braces, then we would do that. And it would give us the flexibility to specify in advance those meetings that would be in person, for which, if it turned out we weren't quorate, it wouldn't be the end of the world.
My question is, will we need to do that? I think we can do what we'd like on the basis of what I'm reading.
Yeah, the bit that's that probably is being referred to is under the voting section, where it says it is important to attend because no decisions can be made unless there is at least one person present from each committee in order to cast that committee's single vote.
But that requires a definition of present.
Yes, yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, these days, standard practice is present is online.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't want us to be creating a problem for ourselves. No. We've sort of danced on a head of a pin to be able to try and have approved minutes from about middle of September. In fact, it seems to me that people should be able to attend however they can, because the whole point is to include people, not to exclude them.
I think North Yorkshire SACRE meet virtually. I don't think they've gone back to being completely in person.
My experience of SACREs in the region, I have the pleasure of sitting on 4, is it's hybrid is the majority model, and some have that in a more formal sense than others. So some SACREs, it depends on what's been agreed locally, but all the other SACREs that I sit on is hybrid, so that members who do want to meet can, but others.
So can I just clarify that you're saying hybrid in the way that some people are there virtually, some people are there physically?
Yes.
All right.
In that, because that's what those SACRE, the online bit is to enable quoracy and for members who can't be there physically, but for members who want to be there physically, they can be, and the hybrid is enabled that because they're meeting in person. Some people do value that, but some do meet virtually as well. I suppose you wouldn't want to always meet. My view is you wouldn't want to always meet virtually, because there is a strength in coming together, and all meeting virtually is a different dynamic, whereas hybrid does enable some people to be in the room if that's helpful. And for recording it as a live thing is the other bit of it.
I do think that it can end up with some people being at an advantage over others, depending on how the technology is set up, that sometimes people online are better deal than people.
Sorry, Chair. I'm not against the concept of a hybrid meeting. What I'm saying is that we are not set up as a local authority to do hybrid meetings properly. And this is a challenge that we put to the IT department from the Joint Standards Committee, because at the moment the Joint Standards Committee does meet in a hybrid way, and it doesn't work. I chair that committee. It does not work. It excludes people that are on the telephone line. When we have council committee meetings and even full council, we have people that can dial in, and that's slightly different. If you try and use that technology, which isn't brilliant for a committee or for a group like this, my experience is that it wouldn't work. And if I might, Chair, just for what it's worth, our next meeting is in May. Our next diarised meeting is in May. The second biggest group on SACRE is Group D, and I think I would be reluctant to try and tie the hands of whatever Group D is in May. I'd be more comfortable if we deferred the decision on this to the main meeting. The other groups will probably still be represented around the table as is currently constituted, and it may well be that Group D would be very similar. I don't know, but I would be reluctant to tie the hands of that moving forward.
And I think it would be worth ensuring there was sufficient gap between the annual council and that meeting. Just in case, right? Oh, we have, right.
Sorry, I knew that's the first time I've used that machine. Just from a newbie's perspective, I've been to 3 of these meetings now, and you've not been quoting any of the 3 that I've been to. And if I may speak from a personal perspective, I'm having to organise childcare to come to a meeting, having left work, gone home, come back, come here, to then not be able to do what we need to be doing. I can see both sides, and if I speak from my professional capacity as a teacher, I can see how in-person meetings and online meetings have both benefits and negatives. I think we need to find something that's a bit like what you were saying, in terms of, if we're not going to be quorate, can we find a way to make it so that we are? Otherwise, we're going to end up having to have another meeting. And if it does get to that point, then for me, I'm going to have to step back, having only just stepped in. So just another couple of perspectives there.
Can I just clarify that there is no constitutional bar on us not running our business however we want? And I would like to run our business to therefore be inclusive and not to waste people's time coming to meetings where they can't take decisions. I'd like to propose that that's how we proceed until we have a further instruction. If Group D's reconstitution want to raise something different, fine.
The Constitution as written does not prohibit joining virtually.
And as an outside body, it doesn't fall under the framework, so it's SACRE to decide how it wants to operate.
I propose that's then how we proceed going forward. Good.
Right, although that will need ratifying at the.
I also see I'm obliged to be consulted on agenda setting. Please don't start doing that.
Right. Okay, that brings us on to agenda item 8, newsletter to schools.
So,
Microphone.
sorry, Chair. The item is there for you. I was asked to put together a newsletter that could be the beginnings of a SACRE newsletter that went out to schools. This is the first one. It is not set in stone as to this is how it should look each time, but it was a starting point to provide something practical that went to schools. But of course, it needs to be shaped and developed by SACRE ongoing. And so this is the starting point, but I'd be keen to hear from SACRE members about things that can be included. One example might be, for example, for a member of SACRE each time to introduce themselves, say which committee they're on, why they believe religious education is important, for example, would be a good way of increasing the visibility of SACRE to schools. There's an opportunity for Interfaith York, for example, at key times to include things in it. But what this one has provided is some signposting to resources and to topical news in the world of RE as a starting point for schools.
Okay.
Ask, what's its frequency of going out?
Again, that can be determined by SACRE. My experience in other SACREs is that it's a once a term newsletter, and it's determined by SACRE whether it's beginning of term or end of term, and it's a gathering of information, unless there's for example, a review of a syllabus might mean you include some extra things at times. But
I think this is great, and thank you very much for doing that. If we have a very small budget, then spending what would be less, and if we're allowed to do this, spending up to £100 on just getting a design template would really I think, make life easier for you, and this is our main communication tool.
Yeah, there wasn't a official template, so I did the best I could with my limited. No, I agree. I completely agree with you. My limited design skills, but I do agree that I think a template would be helpful, and that also then means that whoever is doing a newsletter knows what they're writing to.
We can do that via the print unit here, so we can ask them to come up with a template.
Does National SACRE not offer anything?
No, SACRE, as a national association, is about providing guidance to SACREs, but SACREs determine themselves what they do, and there's no expectation that SACREs do a newsletter. But this was one of the things that was discussed a year ago, and seized the opportunity to get it going, really.
Darish?
This is done very nicely, and I like that. But personal experience from newsletters from various organizations often become bulky because people think that everything that everybody needs to know has to go in there. That just has to be a limited pages. It has to be decided whether the newsletter is going to be 3 pages, 2 pages, 1 page, or what, and stick to that. And if there are things that people need to know, they will go for the next edition. Otherwise, you will end up having bulky ones that people don't read or don't take any notice of that. But the smaller one, particularly these days, people use online readings and have a lot of other things coming along with that. So the shorter it is, the more punchy it is.
Okay. Yes,
Yes, just in terms of the stage of term that it might go out. I don't know, I'm thinking back as a teacher, possibly to have it at the end of a term gives you time to think about it as you're planning ahead. If you receive it at the beginning of term, you know, I don't know whether that's something to think about, the teachers amongst us. It might be better to have it at the end of term rather than at the beginning.
Okay. Do you?
Yeah, I think from a teacher's, sorry, was that you? No. From a teacher's perspective, we're often very tired, as some of you will know, towards the end of term. So it would be about finding the right time to put it. It is nice at the end of term to switch off and not have to think, oh, I must read that in order so that I know what's coming next. So just finding the right time would be something to work on for me personally.
So a little bit after half term.
That was exactly what I was going to suggest, Chair.
Right.
I think it's also important to frame it around key events and things that are coming up. So you'll see that this one obviously highlighted World Religions Day, and that's a really helpful thing to signpost. Interfaith Week would be an important one. So I guess it's about thinking through a whole academic year, and are there key points in that year where actually we would want to be supporting schools with resources, and therefore how much time before that you would want to get information out so that schools have enough time to receive that and to do something with it if they wish to. But hopefully you can see that everything in there is light touch. It's not things that we would be expecting schools to do. It's more, here's some resources that you might find helpful and to use them as you wish. And I've tried to include when I've done other newsletters before, if there's one thing you read this week or one thing you watch this week, is just a little bit of professional development if schools want to pick it up.
All right, thank you for that. Neatly brings us on to agenda item 9, which is Interfaith Week.
Penny, I don't know if you want to speak about Interfaith Week.
So we were segueing into Interfaith Week.
Very positive, the competition that we had. And that we ran in school. We learned some things that we, oh, sorry.
beg your pardon. The competition that we run jointly with SACRE was really positive. We learned some things. We begin to kind of highlight that you exist as a group, as a York Interfaith group, by doing that and saying, oh, hi. Lots of people didn't know we existed, I don't think. But there is a need for consistency, and we'd like to work in partnership again this year with SACRE and do a competition. We'd like to do a writing competition this year. I kind of suggested that to Olivia, and we wondered about, she suggested doing a poem with a theme or a guidance. I'm not quite sure what you call it, but doing a piece of literacy that would incorporate RE as well as English, elements of English and the subject of English and English teachers. So we'd like to run that again, because we'd like to also say, we want to keep doing this. We want to keep having interactions with you as Faith. And the only way to do that is to be consistent and to do it again, isn't it? And we've learned some things from doing it. So I think it was very positive, and to support, not to be a burden on schools, but to support what they're doing and to help them, as well as obviously it helps raise the profile of SACRE and Interfaith within the school community.
Can I just make one observation from a primary school perspective? If there's any sort of a competition that involves writing a poem, my teachers run for the hills. Just because it's one of the hardest things, particularly if you're wanting to involve the younger children, to get them to do a quality piece of sort of interfaith work that is also a quality piece of written poetry is a challenge.
I think where the suggestion of poem came from is because the initial suggestion from Interfaith York was writing a prayer, and so obviously in the context of it being non-confessional and academic RE, it felt asking to write a prayer wasn't appropriate, hence poem. I suppose the question is, if not a poem, how do we, if it's a piece of written work, what does that look like? That's guidance for judging. So my suggestion of poem came from the Spirited Poetry and the National Spirited Poetry competition. Any other suggestions if it's not a poem in terms of writing that is succinct? Because of course we don't want big pieces of writing to judge.
I just wonder if you're going to use, I'm kind of in two camps, so I'm doing the kind of teacher camp now. If you're going to use the word poem, is it, particularly for primary schools, is it how you pitch it? So could you pitch it not as a poem, but even though it becomes a poem? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it just needs that careful pitching, because if the teachers are hung up thinking they've got to get this beautiful piece of poetry out of the children, it just doesn't happen. Whereas a little piece of prose or something, perhaps. So yeah,
I think there's been no conversation yet other than suggestion of prayer. I suggested the word poem because that was non-confessional. There's a meeting of Interfaith York tomorrow night, and we were going to have more of a conversation then. So I think that it'll be about what then is written down that's shared.
Okay, got lots of indication. Doris and then Ben. And then Penny.
Usually the words indicate what you should do. And a piece of literary work, such as that, they can choose whether they want a poem or they want a writing, they want prayer. A piece of literary work will probably suffice them.
One alternative would be to ask the children to tell us one thing they'd like to learn in RE. And that would potentially be useful to us, or theoretically useful.
Penny.
But it needs to be something that can be judged. That would be what I would say to that. Because we did award prizes previously, and there was a judging, and we did have criteria.
I think it's about linking it. I think the other thing we just need to be mindful here that it's an interfaith York competition that needs to link in with the Interfaith Week themes. Because that's what you'd asked for. So I think it's just being mindful that we need to work it out with in terms of what nationally Interfaith Week and the theme and how that fits in, and which we don't have the information on yet.
Usually the theme, that there isn't a set theme nationally, but we set a theme on kind of how we feel, what is needed, what we need to look at. It was about refuge as well last year. So it's just having that feel. It can be anything. But also I'll just take the opportunity, if I may, just to remind you that tomorrow we will be having Dr. James Holt, Professor Holt, do our meeting tomorrow night for Interfaith. And he will be talking about RE in the classroom and expanding it and how to make it work. He's the expert, certainly not me. But that's 7 o'clock here tomorrow night. Anyone that can make it is welcome. It'll be about an hour and a half meeting. But he's very knowledgeable. Olivia knows him. He's very knowledgeable. And he lectures at the University of Chester. That's where he's a member of my faith, but a very knowledgeable man on RE.
Just take Darcy and then Maxine.
Yeah. So far as the competition is concerned, we always think about individual, but we can also have competition for school. Presenting something like a collage or something, they can put their heads together and say, as a school, what they can present, and then that can be judged rather than just an individual. And it brings the cooperation amongst the children presenting something.
That's it.
Yeah, I was just thinking whether we went for something like asking them to write something about what does RE mean to them, or why do they think RE is important as a school subject. So, you know, it leaves it open for them to develop that in different ways.
I think it's a matter for that to be taken back to Interfaith York. The poem only came from a response to what Interfaith York wanted to do, and it being made non-confessional, because I'm just conscious that it's not a SACRE competition, it's an Interfaith York competition. So Penny can take that back to Interfaith York and then come back to us when they've decided what they want to do.
Okay, so Penny, you have a rich seam of views to take to your meeting. But please let us know how it develops so that we can support that. So as we've already dealt with agenda item 10, do we have any correspondence on complaints? No. So, work plan, really, I think from the discussion on agenda item 10, that has a whole raft of things for a future work plan. Yeah. Any other business?
Just on the work plan, Chair, it may be a useful thing to ensure that we are moving forward on the development plan. And that's an opportunity as well where we may want to form small task and finish groups to get bits of that work plan moving forward. So, for example, you know, we've had a suggestion this evening about publicising some form of a type of wire award. Is that something that actually we actually want to get a small group together to scope that out, present it to schools so that they understand that as part of that development plan?
Right, okay, we'll email those out and please volunteer. Councillor Fitzpatrick.
I just want to say that, like all of us, I suppose, we're interested in children in the city and learning about faith. And I was very impressed with the involvement with the Holocaust commemoration in the Minster and the candle ceremony, to see children from other faiths reading, as well as children from the Jewish community. And I think, you know, it was a wonderful event, and I really liked that. I've said previously it was very interesting Ben, to have been at the Friends Meeting House when you had the anniversary event, to see the children from within the Jewish faith as well. You know, it's nice to see people doing that, but particularly good in the Minster to see other faiths there actually with their view and reading. So it was good. It was a very good representation of York as a city.
Thank you for that observation. Any other business? Just going around the room. Okay, future meeting dates, we've had some comment about the May one, so maybe on the June one, which will give the task and finish groups even more time to develop their fantastic ideas to come forward to the next meeting. So thank you all very much.